Marcus Thompson had been working as a security guard at the Riverside Industrial Complex for 12 years. Every night he walked the same routes, checked the same doors, and watched the same empty hallways. The job paid well enough to support his wife Sarah and their 2 teenage daughters, but it was far from exciting. That was exactly how Marcus liked it: quiet, predictable, and safe. The complex housed several companies, including a research facility that worked on environmental projects. Marcus never paid much attention to what went on behind those laboratory doors during the day. His job was simple: keep the building secure when everyone else went home. He knew the scientists by sight, nodding politely when their paths crossed during shift changes, but they lived in different worlds. Dr. Elena Vasquez was one of those scientists. She worked late more often than the others, sometimes staying until Marcus began his rounds at midnight. She always seemed stressed, constantly checking her phone and muttering to herself as she gathered her papers. Marcus noticed she had been working even longer hours lately, her car often the last one in the parking lot besides his own. On that particular Tuesday evening in March, something felt different. Marcus couldn't put his finger on it, but the building seemed to hum with an unusual energy. The fluorescent lights flickered more than usual, and he could hear voices from the research wing long after normal business hours. As he made his first round at midnight, he saw lights still burning in Dr. Vasquez's lab. Around 2 in the morning, Marcus was sitting in the security office when he heard rapid footsteps echoing through the corridor. Through the security monitors, he watched Dr. Vasquez hurrying toward the exit, clutching a thick folder against her chest. Her face was pale and she kept looking over her shoulder as if someone might be following her. She stopped at the security desk, breathing heavily. Her hands were shaking as she set down her keycard and signed out in the visitor log. Marcus had never seen her so agitated. Usually she was composed and professional, offering a brief smile and a quiet goodnight. Tonight was different. "Everything all right, Doc?" Marcus asked, genuinely concerned. He had daughters around her age and felt protective of the young scientists who worked in the building. Dr. Vasquez looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. She glanced around the empty lobby, then leaned closer to the desk. "Marcus, I need to tell someone about this. What I discovered tonight, it changes everything." Marcus set down his coffee cup and gave her his full attention. In all his years working security, he had learned that when people needed to talk, the best thing to do was listen. "What's going on?" She opened the folder slightly, revealing charts, graphs, and satellite images that meant nothing to Marcus, but the fear in her voice was unmistakable. "The data we've been collecting, the environmental readings from the past 6 months. There's a pattern. Something terrible is going to happen, and soon." "What kind of terrible?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Dr. Vasquez took a shaky breath. "The seismic activity, the unusual weather patterns, the changes in groundwater levels, they're all connected. According to our models, we're looking at a major geological event. Not just an earthquake, but something much worse. The entire region could be affected." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "How sure are you about this?" "The data doesn't lie," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've run the calculations dozens of times. I've checked and double-checked everything. We have maybe 3 weeks, possibly less." She closed the folder and clutched it tighter. "I tried to present this to the board today, but they wouldn't listen. They said I was being alarmist, that the data could be interpreted differently. They're more worried about the company's reputation and contracts than people's lives." Marcus looked at the young scientist and saw genuine terror in her eyes. He had been around long enough to recognize when someone was telling the truth, even when that truth was hard to believe. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I could go to the media, but who would believe me? I'm just a junior researcher. I could contact emergency services, but without official backing from the company, they'll probably ignore me too." She stood up, still holding the folder. "I'm going home to think about this. Maybe I can find another way to get people to listen. But Marcus, I want you to know, if I'm right about this, everyone in the valley is in danger. Your family, my family, everyone." As she walked toward the exit, she turned back one more time. "If something happens to me, if I can't convince anyone to take this seriously, promise me you'll remember what I told you tonight. Promise me you'll find a way to warn people." Marcus watched her disappear into the parking lot, her words echoing in his mind. He had always prided himself on being a practical man, someone who dealt with facts and reality rather than speculation and worry. But something about Dr. Vasquez's warning felt real and urgent in a way that scared him. He spent the rest of his shift thinking about what she had said. 3 weeks, maybe less. He thought about Sarah sleeping peacefully at home, about his daughters Emma and Lisa who would be getting ready for school in a few hours. He thought about the thousands of people living in the valley, going about their daily lives with no idea that danger might be approaching. When his shift ended at 6 in the morning, Marcus drove home through the quiet streets of his neighborhood. Everything looked normal. People walking their dogs, joggers starting their morning runs, newspapers lying on front porches. It was hard to imagine that this peaceful scene might change dramatically in just a few weeks. As he pulled into his driveway, Marcus made a decision. He might just be a security guard, but Dr. Vasquez had trusted him with this information for a reason. If she couldn't get anyone to listen, maybe he could find a way to help. He owed it to his family and his community to at least try. He sat in his car for a moment, watching the sun rise over the mountains that surrounded their valley. Those same mountains that had always made him feel safe and protected might soon become a source of unimaginable danger. Marcus took a deep breath and headed inside to face what might be one of the most important days of his life. Marcus couldn't sleep that morning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Dr. Vasquez's frightened face and heard her warning echoing in his mind. Sarah had already left for her job at the elementary school, and the girls were at school, leaving him alone with his thoughts and growing anxiety. He tried to convince himself that he was overreacting. Dr. Vasquez was young, maybe inexperienced. Perhaps the senior scientists were right to dismiss her concerns. But something deep in his gut told him otherwise. In his 12 years of security work, he had developed a good sense for reading people, and everything about her demeanor suggested she was telling the truth. Around noon, Marcus decided to drive back to the industrial complex. He told himself he just wanted to check on things, maybe talk to some of the day shift workers. But really, he hoped to find Dr. Vasquez and learn more about her discovery. The parking lot was busy with the usual daytime activity. Workers moved between buildings. Delivery trucks came and went, and the research facility buzzed with normal operations. Marcus parked near the main entrance and walked inside, nodding to Jerry, the day shift security supervisor. "You're here early," Jerry commented, looking up from his paperwork. "Couldn't sleep?" "Something like that," Marcus replied. "Everything quiet today?" Jerry shrugged. "Pretty normal. Though there was some kind of meeting in the research wing this morning. Lots of suits going in and out." "Looked serious?" Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Any idea what it was about?" "None of my business," Jerry said, but then leaned closer. "Though I did hear one of the secretaries saying something about a researcher being put on administrative leave. Apparently she was spreading rumors that upset some important clients." Marcus's heart sank. He had a terrible feeling he knew which researcher Jerry was talking about. "Did you catch a name?" "Vasquez, I think. Young lady, works late a lot. You know her?" Marcus nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. "Yeah, I've seen her around. She seemed dedicated to her work." "Well, dedication can go too far sometimes," Jerry said, returning to his paperwork. "Company's got to protect its reputation." Marcus left the building with a heavy heart and drove to the nearest coffee shop. He needed to think, and he couldn't do it at home where everything reminded him of what might be at stake. He ordered a large coffee and found a quiet corner booth, pulling out his phone to search for Dr. Elena Vasquez online. Her professional profile showed an impressive background in geological research and environmental science. She had published several papers on seismic activity and had graduated from a prestigious university with honors. This wasn't someone prone to wild theories or attention-seeking behavior. This was a serious scientist with real credentials. Marcus spent the next 2 hours researching earthquakes, geological events, and emergency preparedness. The more he read, the more concerned he became. Major geological events could indeed cause widespread destruction, and early warning systems weren't always reliable. If Dr. Vasquez was right, and if no one was listening to her, thousands of people could be in danger. That evening, Marcus arrived at work with a plan. He would try to find Dr. Vasquez's contact information and reach out to her directly. Maybe together they could figure out a way to get someone in authority to take the warning seriously. But when he checked the employee directory, Dr. Vasquez's name was no longer listed. Her keycard access had been revoked, and according to the system, she was no longer employed by the company. In less than 24 hours, they had completely erased her from their records. Marcus felt a chill of fear mixed with anger. This wasn't how legitimate companies handled scientific disagreements. If Dr. Vasquez's data was truly flawed, they would have assigned other researchers to double-check her work and issue a formal correction. The fact that they had simply fired her and tried to make her disappear suggested they were afraid of what she might reveal. During his rounds that night, Marcus found himself paying closer attention to the research wing. He noticed that several offices had been cleared out, and workers were removing computers and filing cabinets from Dr. Vasquez's former laboratory. They were systematically destroying any trace of her research. Around midnight, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Using his security access, he entered the research wing and made his way to Dr. Vasquez's former office. The room had been mostly emptied, but he found something the cleanup crew had missed: a USB drive that had fallen behind a desk and was hidden in the shadows. His hand shook as he pocketed the device. He had never stolen anything from work before, had never violated the trust his employers had placed in him. But if this USB drive contained the data Dr. Vasquez had shown him, it might be the only evidence left of the impending danger. The rest of his shift crawled by slowly. Marcus kept expecting someone to burst through the doors and arrest him for theft, but the night remained quiet. When 6 a.m. finally arrived, he practically ran to his car. At home, Marcus waited until Sarah and the girls left for the day before inserting the USB drive into his computer. What he found made his blood run cold. The drive contained detailed reports, charts, and predictive models that painted a terrifying picture. According to the data, seismic activity in the region had been increasing steadily over the past 6 months. Ground sensors showed unusual stress patterns along several fault lines, and satellite imagery revealed subtle changes in the landscape that suggested massive underground pressure building up. Most alarming of all was Dr. Vasquez's final report, dated just 2 days ago. Based on the accelerating pattern of seismic events, she predicted a major geological catastrophe within 2 to 3 weeks. The event wouldn't be a simple earthquake. It would be a cascade of connected disasters that could affect the entire valley and beyond. Marcus printed out the most important documents and spent hours studying them. He wasn't a scientist, but the evidence seemed overwhelming. The data came from multiple sources and had been cross-referenced with historical geological events. Dr. Vasquez hadn't been spreading rumors or seeking attention. She had been trying to save lives. That afternoon, Marcus called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. He drove to the city hall and asked to speak with someone in the emergency management office. After waiting for 2 hours, he was finally granted a brief meeting with Assistant Emergency Coordinator Janet Mills. Ms. Mills listened politely as Marcus explained the situation, but her expression grew increasingly skeptical as he spoke. When he showed her the documents from the USB drive, she barely glanced at them. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your concern," she said in a tone that suggested the opposite, "but we can't base emergency decisions on unauthorized research from a disgraced former employee. If there was a real geological threat, we would have been notified through proper channels. But what if those proper channels are being suppressed?" Marcus asked. "What if the company is covering this up to protect their business interests?" Ms. Mills stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. "I'm sorry, but without official verification from recognized geological authorities, there's nothing we can do. I'd suggest you avoid spreading these unsubstantiated claims, as they could cause unnecessary panic." Marcus left City Hall feeling defeated but more determined than ever. If the authorities wouldn't listen, he would have to find another way to warn people. As he drove home through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, he looked at every house, every school, every business with new eyes. These weren't just buildings. They were filled with people he cared about, people who deserved to know what might be coming. That night, as he lay awake next to his sleeping wife, Marcus made a decision that would put everything he held dear at risk. If no one else would take Dr. Vasquez's warning seriously, he would find a way to get the word out himself, regardless of the consequences. Marcus spent the next 3 days trying to figure out how to warn people without sounding like a crazy conspiracy theorist. He couldn't shake the image of Dr. Vasquez's terrified face, and the data from the USB drive haunted his every waking moment. Time was running out, and he felt the weight of thousands of lives on his shoulders. His first attempt was with his own family. That Friday evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Marcus tried to bring up the subject carefully. He started by asking his daughters about their geology classes and whether they had learned about earthquakes. "Dad, why are you suddenly so interested in earthquakes?" 16-year-old Emma asked, looking up from her phone. "Did you watch another disaster movie?" Sarah laughed. "Your father's been acting strange all week. He keeps checking the emergency kit and asking about our insurance policies." Marcus felt his face flush. "I just think it's important to be prepared. We live in California, after all." His younger daughter Lisa looked concerned. "Are we in danger, Dad? Is something going to happen?" "No, sweetie," Sarah said quickly, shooting Marcus a warning look. "Your father is just being overly cautious." But Marcus couldn't let it go. "What if I told you that I had reliable information suggesting we should be extra careful for the next few weeks? Maybe consider visiting your sister in Arizona." Sarah's expression changed. "Marcus, what's going on?" "You're scaring the girls." That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Sarah confronted him directly. "Something's been bothering you all week. Are you having problems at work? Is someone threatening you?" Marcus wanted desperately to tell her everything, but he could see the concern in her eyes. If he told her about Dr. Vasquez's warning, she would either think he was having a breakdown or become terrified herself. Either option seemed fair to her or the girls. "I just have a feeling we should be extra prepared," he said weakly. "Call it intuition." Sarah studied his face for a long moment. "Marcus Thompson, in 22 years of marriage, you've never been the type to act on feelings or intuition. You're the most practical man I know. Something specific is bothering you, and until you tell me what it is, I can't help you deal with it." The weight of keeping this secret was becoming unbearable. Marcus realized he couldn't protect his family if they didn't understand the danger they might be facing. Taking a deep breath, he decided to tell Sarah everything. He started with Dr. Vasquez's late-night confession and worked through the entire story: the USB drive, the data, his failed attempts to warn the authorities. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When he finished, Sarah was quiet for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. "Show me the data." They spent the next 2 hours going through Dr. Vasquez's research. Sarah had studied some geology in college and could understand more of the technical details than Marcus. What she saw clearly disturbed her. "This looks legitimate," she said finally. "The methodology seems sound and the data is comprehensive. But Marcus, if this is true, why isn't anyone taking it seriously?" "Because the company fired her and covered everything up. Because the government officials I spoke to won't act without official authorization. Because no one wants to believe something this terrible could happen." Sarah closed the laptop and looked at her husband. "So what do we do? If you're right, if this data is accurate, we can't just save ourselves. What about my students? What about our neighbors and friends?" Marcus felt a surge of love for his wife. Even faced with this terrifying information, her first thought was for others. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been trying to figure that out for days." "What about social media?" Sarah suggested. "You could post the information online, let people decide for themselves." Marcus had considered this option but worried about the legal consequences. "What if the company sues me for theft? What if I'm wrong and cause a panic for nothing? I could lose my job and we could lose everything." "And what if you're right and we do nothing?" Sarah countered. "Could you live with yourself knowing you had a chance to warn people and didn't take it?" The next morning, Marcus made a decision. He would find Dr. Vasquez and see if she was still trying to get the word out. Maybe together they could develop a strategy that would get people's attention without landing them both in legal trouble. Finding Dr. Vasquez proved easier than expected. A quick search of social media revealed that she had been posting about the geological threat on her personal accounts, but her warnings were buried among thousands of other posts and hadn't gained much attention. Her profile showed that she was working as a freelance consultant while looking for a new position. Marcus sent her a private message explaining who he was and asking if they could meet. She responded within an hour, agreeing to meet at a coffee shop across town that afternoon. When Marcus arrived at the coffee shop, he immediately recognized Dr. Vasquez sitting in a corner booth. She looked exhausted and there were dark circles under her eyes. She had clearly not been sleeping well since their encounter at the security desk. "Thank you for reaching out," she said as Marcus sat down. "I was beginning to think I was completely alone in this." "I have the data," Marcus said quietly. From your USB drive. I've studied it and my wife has looked at it too. We believe you. Dr. Vasquez's eyes filled with tears. You have no idea how much that means to me. For the past week, I've been questioning my own sanity. Everyone at the company made me feel like I was some kind of hysterical fool. The data doesn't lie, Marcus said, echoing her words from that night. What's our timeline looking like now? She pulled out her tablet and showed him updated calculations she had been working on. It's accelerating faster than I initially predicted. Based on the seismic events of the past week, I now think we're looking at 10 to 14 days, maybe less. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Have you made any progress getting anyone to listen? I've tried everything, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I've contacted the media, but they want official sources to confirm the story before they'll run it. I've reached out to other geological research facilities, but they say they need time to verify my findings. I've posted on social media, but it's just getting lost in the noise. They sat in silence for a moment, both contemplating the magnitude of the situation. Finally, Marcus spoke. What if we went public together? A respected scientist and a longtime community member. What if we held a press conference or organized a town hall meeting? Dr. Vasquez looked up with a spark of hope. That might work. People might listen if we present a united front, but we'd need to be prepared for the backlash. The company will try to destroy both of our reputations. I'm willing to take that risk, Marcus said. Are you? She nodded firmly. I became a scientist to help people, not to protect corporate interests. If there's even a chance we can save lives, we have to try. They spent the next hour developing a plan. Dr. Vasquez would prepare a simplified presentation of her findings, focusing on the most compelling evidence and clear timeline. Marcus would use his connections in the community to organize a meeting and get people to attend. They would present the information together and urge people to take basic precautions while they tried to get official authorities to act. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Vasquez grabbed Marcus's arm. Thank you for believing in me. I know this could cost you everything. Marcus thought about his family, his job, his peaceful life that was about to be turned upside down. Then he thought about all the families in the valley who had no idea what might be coming. Some things are more important than personal security, he said. Let's go save some lives. Organizing the town hall meeting proved more challenging than Marcus had anticipated. His first attempt was to book the community center, but the city council required weeks of advance notice and official permits for any public gathering discussing potential emergencies. The school district wouldn't allow them to use the high school auditorium without administrative approval, which could take days they didn't have. Finally, Pastor Williams at the Methodist Church agreed to let them use the fellowship hall on Sunday evening. Marcus had known Pastor Williams for years. The man had officiated at both his daughter's confirmations and had always been supportive of community causes. When Marcus explained the situation, leaving out some of the more complicated details about corporate cover-ups, the pastor agreed immediately. If there's even a small chance people are in danger, we have an obligation to let them know, Pastor Williams said. I'll help you spread the word. Marcus and Dr. Vasquez spent the weekend preparing their presentation and trying to get people to attend. Marcus called everyone he knew, neighbors, co-workers, parents of his daughter's friends, members of his bowling league. Dr. Vasquez reached out to her former colleagues and anyone in the scientific community who might listen. The response was mixed. Some people were curious and agreed to come. Others were skeptical and dismissive. A few were openly hostile, accusing Marcus of spreading fear and conspiracy theories. His supervisor at the security company called him on Saturday afternoon. Marcus, I'm hearing some disturbing rumors about you spreading panic about earthquakes, his supervisor said. I hope you know that any public statements you make reflect on this company. This is on my own time and I'm not representing the company, Marcus replied carefully. I'm just a concerned citizen sharing information. Well, make sure it stays that way. The research facility is one of our biggest clients and they're not happy about their former employee causing trouble. Don't give them any reason to blame us for this situation. After hanging up, Marcus realized that word of the meeting had already reached his employers. Dr. Vasquez was facing similar pressure. She called him Saturday evening sounding discouraged. 2 of my potential consulting clients have backed out, she reported. Apparently, word is spreading in the scientific community that I'm unstable. I'm being blacklisted from the industry. Are you having second thoughts? Marcus asked, though he hoped she wouldn't abandon their plan. No, she said firmly. If anything, their reaction convinces me more that we're doing the right thing. If my research was truly flawed, they would prove it wrong with better data. Instead, they're trying to silence me and destroy my credibility. That's not how legitimate science works. Sunday evening arrived gray and rainy, which seemed appropriate for their grim message. Marcus arrived at the church an hour early to help set up chairs and test the projection equipment. Dr. Vasquez arrived shortly after, carrying a laptop and a box of printed materials. How many people are you expecting? She asked nervously. Marcus looked around the fellowship hall, which could seat about 100 people. I honestly don't know. I'm hoping for at least 30 or 40. As 7 o'clock approached, people began filtering in slowly. Marcus recognized many faces from around town. His neighbors, the Johnsons, his daughter's math teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, the pharmacist from the drugstore where his family filled prescriptions. There were also some people he didn't know, including a few who looked like they might be reporters. By 7:15, about 60 people had gathered. Marcus felt a mix of relief that anyone had come at all and disappointment that it wasn't more. Pastor Williams opened the meeting with a brief prayer for wisdom and discernment, then introduced Marcus. Marcus stood up on shaky legs and looked out at the assembled crowd. These were his neighbors and friends, people whose lives might depend on what he and Dr. Vasquez were about to reveal. The weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know this meeting was organized on short notice, and I appreciate you taking time from your Sunday evening to be here. What Dr. Vasquez and I are going to share with you tonight is difficult to hear, but we believe it's information you have a right to know. He introduced Dr. Vasquez, briefly outlining her credentials and experience. When she stood up to speak, Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly, but her voice was steady and professional. I want to start by showing you some data, she said, clicking to her first slide. These are seismic readings from monitoring stations throughout our region over the past 6 months. For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Vasquez walked the audience through her research. She explained the patterns she had observed, the increasing frequency and intensity of micro-earthquakes and the unusual stress patterns appearing along multiple fault lines. She kept the technical language to a minimum, focusing on what the data meant in practical terms. Based on these trends and similar patterns observed before major geological events in other regions, I believe we are facing a significant earthquake or series of earthquakes within the next 1 to 2 weeks, she concluded. A murmur ran through the crowd. Marcus could see a mix of expressions. Some people looked frightened, others skeptical, a few seemed angry. Mrs. Chen, who ran the local bakery, raised her hand. Dr. Vasquez, why hasn't this information been shared through official channels? Why aren't emergency services warning us? Dr. Vasquez took a deep breath. That's a complicated question. The company I worked for disagreed with my conclusions and has chosen not to act on this information. I've contacted government agencies, but they require official verification that may not come in time. So you're saying there's a cover-up? Asked a man Marcus didn't recognize. I'm saying that sometimes institutional priorities don't align with public safety. Dr. Vasquez replied diplomatically. The questions came faster after that. People wanted to know about insurance, evacuation plans, and what they should do to protect their families. Marcus fielded many of the practical questions while Dr. Vasquez handled the technical ones. About halfway through the question period, Marcus noticed 2 men in suits enter the back of the hall. They didn't sit down but stood near the exit, observing and occasionally taking notes. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. They looked like corporate lawyers or private investigators. One audience member, a man named Dave who worked at the bank, stood up and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. This all sounds very convenient. A disgraced scientist and a security guard with no credentials telling us to panic about something that hasn't happened. How do we know this isn't some kind of scam or publicity stunt? What would we gain from scaring people unnecessarily? Marcus asked. I'm risking my job and my reputation to be here tonight. Maybe you're working for some disaster preparedness company that wants to sell us supplies, Dave suggested. Maybe this is all made up. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. I understand your skepticism, and I encourage you to be cautious about any claims, including mine. But I want you to consider this. What's the harm in being prepared? If I'm wrong, the worst thing that happens is you waste some money on emergency supplies and maybe take a vacation out of the area. If I'm right and you do nothing, the consequences could be catastrophic. Pastor Williams stood up from the front row. I think Dr. Vasquez makes a valid point. Even if there's just a small chance this could happen, don't we have an obligation to our families to take reasonable precautions? The meeting continued for another hour, with the crowd gradually dividing into three groups: those who seemed convinced and wanted to take action, those who remained skeptical, but agreed that some preparation might be wise, and those who dismissed the entire presentation as fear-mongering. As people began to leave, several individuals approached Marcus and Dr. Vasquez privately. Some wanted copies of the data, others asked for specific advice about protecting their families. A few offered to help spread the word to friends and relatives, but Marcus's attention was focused on the two men in suits, who had remained in the back throughout the entire meeting. As the crowd thinned, they approached the front of the hall. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Vasquez, the taller man said, extending his hand. I'm Robert Hayes, legal counsel for Riverside Industrial Complex. I think we need to have a conversation. The fellowship hall had emptied except for Marcus, Dr. Vasquez, Pastor Williams, and the two lawyers. The atmosphere grew tense as Robert Hayes pulled out a tablet and set it on the table in front of them. Before we begin, Hayes said smoothly, I want you both to understand that this conversation is being recorded for legal purposes. Dr. Vasquez crossed her arms. Are we under arrest? Nothing that dramatic, Hayes replied. But you have both engaged in activities that could have serious legal consequences. Dr. Vasquez, you violated your non-disclosure agreement by sharing proprietary research data. Mr. Thompson, you committed theft by removing company property without authorization. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. I was trying to save lives. I'm sure your motivations were admirable, the second lawyer said, introducing himself as James Crawford. But good intentions don't protect you from criminal charges. Corporate theft is a felony in this state. Pastor Williams stepped forward. Now wait just a minute. These people came here tonight because they believed their community was in danger. Are you telling me your company is more concerned about protecting its reputation than protecting human lives? Hayes turned to the pastor with a patronizing smile. Reverend, I understand your concern, but this situation is more complicated than it appears. Dr. Vasquez was terminated because her research methodology was flawed and her conclusions were unsupported by peer review. She's been spreading false information that could cause unnecessary panic. Then prove it, Dr. Vasquez said defiantly. Show me where my data is wrong. Bring in other experts to review my work. If I'm truly mistaken, I'll publicly retract everything. Crawford laughed coldly. That's not how this works. The burden is on you to prove your claims, and you've failed to do so through proper channels. Instead, you've chosen to frighten innocent people with unsubstantiated theories. Marcus stood up, his anger overriding his fear. Those innocent people have a right to make their own decisions about their safety. If your company's research contradicts Dr. Vasquez's findings, why not share it publicly? Why are you trying to silence her instead of proving her wrong? Because, Hayes said, his tone becoming more menacing. Dr. Vasquez's irresponsible behavior has already cost our company 3 major contracts. Our clients don't want to be associated with an organization that employs unstable researchers who spread doomsday predictions. Dr. Vasquez slammed her hand on the table. Unstable? I have a PhD in geological sciences from Stanford University. I've published peer-reviewed research for 8 years. The only thing unstable here is the geological situation that everyone is choosing to ignore. Hayes pulled up something on his tablet and showed it to her. This is an analysis of your work conducted by 3 independent geological experts. They all concluded that your interpretation of the seismic data was deeply flawed and that your predictive models were based on incorrect assumptions. Dr. Vasquez grabbed the tablet and studied the screen. After a few minutes, her face flushed with anger. This is a joke. These aren't independent experts. 2 of them work for companies that have contracts with Riverside Industrial, and the third one hasn't published geological research in over a decade. Plus, they're only looking at 3 weeks of data, instead of the full 6-month pattern I documented. Nevertheless, Crawford said, their credentials are impeccable and their analysis contradicts your conclusions. Of course it does, Dr. Vasquez shot back. They were paid to reach that conclusion. This isn't science, it's corporate damage control. Hayes closed the tablet and fixed both Marcus and Dr. Vasquez with a stern look. Here's what's going to happen. You're both going to cease all public discussion of this matter immediately. Dr. Vasquez, you will post a retraction on all your social media accounts stating that your previous warnings were based on incomplete data and premature conclusions. Mr. Thompson, you will return the stolen USB drive and sign a statement acknowledging your theft. And if we refuse? Marcus asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Then we proceed with criminal charges, Hayes said matter-of-factly. Dr. Vasquez will be sued for violating her NDA and potentially charged with creating a public disturbance. Mr. Thompson will face felony theft charges and likely lose his job and pension. Your family's financial security will be destroyed. Pastor Williams had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. This is extortion, plain and simple. You're using legal threats to silence people who are trying to help their community. Crawford turned to the pastor. And you, Reverend, might want to be careful about allowing your church to be used for spreading false information. Your tax-exempt status could be reviewed if the IRS determines you're engaging in inappropriate political activities. The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. He thought about Sarah and his daughters, about the house they had worked so hard to pay for, about the modest retirement savings that represented their future security. Was he really willing to sacrifice everything his family had built? Dr. Vasquez was clearly wrestling with similar thoughts. How long do we have to decide? She asked quietly. 24 hours, Hayes said, standing up. We'll expect your written responses by tomorrow evening. And just to be clear, any further public statements about geological threats will be met with immediate legal action. After the lawyers left, the three remaining people sat in stunned silence. Pastor Williams was the first to speak. I've seen a lot of things in my 40 years of ministry, but I've never seen anything quite this evil. They're literally threatening to destroy your lives to prevent you from warning people about danger. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a massive headache building. What choice do we have? I can't risk my family's future on something that might not even happen. But what if it does happen? Dr. Vasquez asked. What if we stay silent and people die who could have been saved? How do we live with that? How do we live with our families being destroyed by lawsuits and criminal charges? Marcus countered. Maybe there's another way. Maybe we can find someone else to carry the message forward. Dr. Vasquez shook her head. Who? Anyone who speaks out will face the same threats we're facing. The company has unlimited resources and a team of lawyers. They can silence anyone who tries to warn people. Pastor Williams stood up and began pacing. There has to be something we can do. Some way to get the word out without directly violating their demands. Like what? Marcus asked desperately. I don't know yet, but I refuse to believe that evil wins just because it has better lawyers. Give me tonight to think about this. Maybe I can find a solution that protects you both while still getting the warning out. As they prepared to leave, Marcus felt a vibration in his pocket. He pulled out his phone and saw a text message from an unknown number. The data is real. Much worse than you know. Check your email. Trust no one else. He showed the message to Dr. Vasquez, whose face went pale. I didn't send this, she said immediately. Marcus opened his email and found a message from an encrypted account with several large file attachments. The subject line read, "The truth they don't want you to know." The files contained geological data from multiple sources, government monitoring stations, university research facilities, and private companies. The pattern was unmistakable and terrifying. The seismic activity Dr. Vasquez had identified was just the beginning. According to this new data, they weren't looking at a single earthquake. They were looking at a cascading series of geological events that could affect the entire region. More disturbing still, the data showed that several government agencies and major corporations had been aware of the developing situation for months. There had been quiet evacuations of key personnel, strategic relocations of valuable equipment, and suspicious stock transactions by people with insider knowledge. Dr. Vasquez stared at the data with growing horror. This is so much worse than what I discovered. If this information is accurate, we're not talking about thousands of people at risk. We're talking about hundreds of thousands. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. Who sent this? How did they get our contact information? The answer came in another text message. There are others who know the truth. We've been watching your efforts. The situation is accelerating faster than anyone predicted. You have less than a week. The only question is whether you'll let them silence you when so many lives are at stake. Pastor Williams looked at the data and then at Marcus and Dr. Vasquez. I think God just answered my prayers about finding another way. Someone else is fighting this battle. You're not alone. Marcus stared at his phone, knowing that everything was about to change. The anonymous messages had shifted the stakes dramatically. It was no longer about protecting his family from legal consequences. It was about whether he could live with himself if he stayed silent while disaster approached. We need to make a decision, Dr. Vasquez said quietly. Do we give in to their threats or do we find a way to fight back? Marcus thought about his daughters sleeping peacefully at home, unaware that their world might be about to change forever. Then he thought about all the other daughters, sons, parents, and grandparents who deserve the chance to protect themselves. We fight, he said finally, but we're going to need help. The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work again and met Dr. Vasquez at a small diner on the outskirts of town. They had chosen a public place where they felt safe to talk, though both kept glancing around nervously for any sign they were being watched. I've been going through the files all night, Dr. Vasquez said, her laptop open on the table between them. Whoever sent us this information has access to data from multiple government agencies, private research facilities, and international monitoring stations. This isn't the work of a single person. This is an organized effort by people with serious resources and connections. Marcus sipped his coffee, which had grown cold while he studied the documents. The question is, who are they and why are they helping us? As if in answer to his question, a woman in her 50s approached their table. She was well-dressed and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Vasquez, my name is Catherine Mitchell. I sent you those files. Marcus and Dr. Vasquez exchanged glances before Marcus gestured for her to sit down. Who are you? He asked directly. I'm a former emergency management coordinator for the state government, she said, settling into the booth. I was forced to resign 6 months ago when I tried to raise concerns about the geological data we were seeing. Like Dr. Vasquez, I was told my analysis was flawed and my warnings were premature. Forced to resign? Dr. Vasquez asked. Catherine nodded grimly. Budget cuts, they called it. But it was really about keeping me quiet. I'd been pushing for enhanced monitoring and emergency preparedness based on the seismic patterns I was observing. When I wouldn't back down, they eliminated my position and restructured the department to remove oversight responsibilities. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. But I wasn't the only one. Over the past 6 months, key personnel in emergency management, geological research, and disaster preparedness have been quietly removed from their positions or reassigned to other duties. Anyone who questioned the official narrative that everything was normal found themselves out of a job. Marcus felt a chill. How many people are we talking about? At least 24 that I know of, probably more. Scientists, emergency coordinators, government officials, all of them raising similar concerns about increasing geological instability, and all of them silenced through various means. Dr. Vasquez pulled up some of the data on her laptop. The information you sent us shows government agencies have been aware of the situation for months. Why hasn't there been any public warning? Catherine's expression darkened. Because the economic implications are staggering. We're talking about a region that represents billions of dollars in real estate, infrastructure, and business investments. A mass evacuation would trigger economic collapse even if the geological event never materialized. So the decision was made at the highest levels to suppress the information and hope the situation stabilized on its own. And if it doesn't stabilize? Marcus asked, though he feared the answer. Then a lot of very wealthy and powerful people will have quietly moved their assets and personnel to safety, while leaving everyone else to face the consequences, Catherine said bluntly. She pulled out her own tablet and showed them satellite images and seismic data from the past week. The situation is accelerating rapidly. Based on the latest readings, I believe we have less than 72 hours before the initial event. Dr. Vasquez studied the new data, her face growing pale. This is consistent with the patterns I observed, but accelerated far beyond my original timeline. How confident are you in this assessment? Confident enough that I moved my own family out of the region yesterday, Catherine replied. I've been monitoring this situation for months and all the indicators are now pointing to imminent failure along multiple fault lines. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were facing. 72 hours. That's not enough time to evacuate hundreds of thousands of people, even if we could get someone to authorize it. No, Catherine agreed, but it might be enough time to save some lives if we can get the word out effectively. She explained that she had been working with a network of former government officials, dismissed scientists and concerned citizens who had been quietly documenting the cover-up. They had evidence of the suppressed warnings, the strategic evacuations of key personnel, and the economic motivations behind the silence. We've prepared a comprehensive information package that we're ready to release simultaneously to major news outlets, social media platforms, and emergency services, Catherine said, but we need credible local voices to help legitimize the warning. Dr. Vasquez's research and Mr. Thompson's community connections make you both ideal spokespersons. What about the legal threats? Marcus asked. The company's lawyers made it very clear what would happen if we continued speaking out. Catherine smiled grimly. Let them try to sue us after we expose their cover-up. Public opinion has a way of protecting whistleblowers, especially when lives are at stake. Besides, if this geological event happens as predicted, their lawsuits will be the least of anyone's concerns. Dr. Vasquez closed her laptop and looked at both of them. I'm in. I became a scientist to serve the public good, not to protect corporate profits. If there's a chance we can save lives, I have to take it. Marcus thought about his conversation with Sarah the night before. She had been supportive but terrified, knowing that their family's entire future hung in the balance. He thought about his daughters, about all the families in their community who trusted him to protect them. What exactly are you asking us to do? He asked. Catherine outlined the plan. They would simultaneously release the suppressed data through multiple channels. A coordinated media blitz designed to reach as many people as possible before the authorities could shut it down. Marcus would use his community connections to spread the word locally, while Dr. Vasquez would provide scientific credibility to the warnings. The goal isn't to create panic, Catherine emphasized. It's to give people information so they can make their own decisions about their safety. Some will choose to leave the area temporarily. Others will decide to stay but take precautions. Either way, they'll have a chance to protect themselves. Marcus made his decision. All right, but I want my family out of the area first. If I'm going to risk everything to warn people, I need to know my wife and daughters are safe. Agreed, Catherine said. We can arrange for your family to stay with allies outside the danger zone. Dr. Vasquez, what about your family? My parents live in Seattle. I can get them to take a spontaneous vacation somewhere safe, she replied. They spent the next hour finalizing the details. Catherine's network had prepared press releases, social media campaigns, and direct outreach to emergency services in surrounding areas. They had backup communication methods in case their primary channels were blocked, and they had legal support ready to defend against inevitable lawsuits. As they prepared to leave, Catherine grabbed Marcus's arm. I want you to understand something. What we're about to do will change your life forever. Even if we're wrong about the timeline, even if the geological event doesn't happen, you'll be seen as either a hero who tried to save lives or a troublemaker who caused unnecessary panic. There's no going back to your quiet life after this. Marcus nodded. I understand. But I've realized something over the past few days. Sometimes the most important thing you can do with your life is to use it to protect others. If that cost me my job, my reputation, or even my freedom, so be it. Dr. Vasquez stood up, her expression determined. When do we start? Catherine checked her watch. The coordinated release begins in 6 hours. That gives you time to get your families to safety and prepare your local outreach. After that, we hold nothing back. We tell the world everything we know and let people decide for themselves what to do with the information. As Marcus drove home to explain the situation to Sarah and convince her to take the girls somewhere safe, he felt a mixture of terror and relief. Terror at what might be coming and what he was risking by speaking out. Relief that he was finally taking action instead of carrying the burden of knowledge alone. That evening, as Sarah packed emergency bags for herself and the girls, she looked at her husband with a mixture of pride and fear. Are you sure about this, Marcus? Once you do this, there's no going back. Marcus hugged his wife tightly. I'm sure. Whatever happens next, I want our daughters to know that when their father had a chance to help protect people, he took it, even if it cost us everything. As his family drove away toward safety, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. In a few hours, he would help release information that could save thousands of lives or destroy his own. Either way, he would finally be able to sleep, knowing he had done everything possible to protect the people he cared about. The countdown to revelation had begun,